If you're trying to tackle the startup world, maybe you're an entrepreneur, investor, or, just someone fascinated by it, you are constantly hit with a certain narrative.
Hmm.
And that narrative is always sleek, right? It's highly polished. It tells the story of the instant unicorn, the brilliant college dropout, the massive IPO.
And that narrative is, for the most part, a lie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a complex, beautifully built model home that's designed to sell you a fantasy.
Right.
So our mission today is to basically grab a sledgehammer and just cut right through that facade, get to the structural truths that nobody, and I mean nobody, especially not VCs or PR firms, really wants to talk about.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've done a deep dive into the insights from Rand Fishkin, who's the founder of the SEO software company Moz, specifically his book Lost and Founder, a painfully honest field guide to the startup world.
And it really is painfully honest. It's part memoir, part operating manual, and it's brutal.
He has this central metaphor that just feels so spot on.
It really is. The startup world, he says, operates like a complicated and honestly a pretty unfair video game. And if you're a first-time player, you're basically starting blind.
No map, no guide.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No equipment. And you're going to waste years, you're going to waste a fortune making mistakes that are, completely avoidable if you just knew the rules.
That's a painful way to think about it. What makes it feel so unfair for that first timer?
It's the sheer amount of hidden knowledge. The real cheat code isn't some, magical growth hack that gets you 100,000 users overnight.
Right.
The real advantage is having the map. It's the connections to mentors, to seasoned advisors, to partners who have been through that same quagmire before and are willing to just tell you the ugly truth.
The truth about the debt, the burnout, the dilution, all the stuff that's not in the TechCrunch article.
Exactly. It's like that famous line, right? It's dangerous to go alone. You need a network, a community, people who will plan out where the landmines are buried.
Which is why, as he argues, second and third-time entrepreneurs have such dramatically better track records.
Precisely. It's not because they have better ideas. They have better maps. They already know the mechanics of the game.
So our goal for this deep dive is to basically deliver that map to you. We are going to dismantle these carefully crafted Silicon Valley myths and get to what he calls the ugly, heartbreaking realities.
Yeah, we'll cover the surprising truth about who founders really are, why raising a bunch of money is actually rarely the right move.
And why transparency is a superpower. We'll also get into the key differences between, say, a temporary growth hack and a marketing flywheel that can actually sustain a business.
Mm-hmm. And we'll explore some really counterintuitive stuff, like the surprising financial superiority of a services company over a glamorous product company in, a lot of cases.
We'll also dig into why explicitly defined values are organizational superpowers and how a founder's personal weaknesses literally become the company's structural flaws.
This is your shortcut. It's the knowledge that usually takes a decade and, frankly, a mountain of debt to acquire on your own.
Okay, let's start with the big one. The mythology of the founder. We need to challenge this pervasive, aggrandized archetype of the founder who pulls themselves up from nothing.
Yeah, the scrappy underdog story.
Exactly. We've been sold this romantic story of the broke genius conquering the world, but the actual data, it points to a very, very different and much more predictable pattern.
The narrative of the poor bootstrapping founder is mostly fiction. It's just not true. Economists at UC Berkeley actually analyzed the shared traits of successful entrepreneurs.
And what'd they find?
A hard dose of reality. Most founders actually come from backgrounds of significant wealth and privilege.
That is immediately shocking. I mean, it contradicts every biopic, every media profile we consume. Why do you think that privilege is such a strong predictor?
It's the safety net. It's this massive hidden safety net. A founder from a wealthy background has access to what the book calls social capital.
Their parents' network.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Access to angel investors right out of the gate. The ability to just risk a few years without a salary because they know their family won't let them starve. If the business fails, they can move back home. They can rely on their network to get a soft landing somewhere else. A founder who genuinely has nothing has none of that luxury.
Yeah.
It makes taking big risks exponentially more terrifying.
It completely recontextualizes that whole risking everything narrative, doesn't it? If your safety net is made of cash, your risk tolerance is just fundamentally different.
Completely. And it's not just wealth. There's also the age stereotype we have to bust.
Right, the brilliant 20-something college dropout,
Yeah.
the Zuckerberg or Gates archetype.
Yeah, but the Kauffman Foundation found the majority of founders are actually between 35 and 44 years old.
That changes the image significantly. We're talking about people who probably already have career experience, maybe families, maybe they failed before.
Exactly. The young genius is the statistical exception. It's just warped by survivorship bias. Most companies are founded by experienced professionals who've already built up capital, some domain expertise, and a network. They're not inventing the wheel from scratch.
And the Moz origin story itself is the perfect example of this non-archetypal path. It didn't start with some, high-concept software pitch in Silicon Valley.
Not even close.
Yeah.
It was an accidental start back in 2001 in suburban Seattle. It began as a mom and son consultancy.
A mom and son consultancy.
Yeah, designing websites. Rand Fishkin notes that this was probably the least likely combination to succeed in the tech field at the time. A young guy and his mother operating out of a small office.
And that business, that initial consultancy, struggled for years through the dot-com bust. Why?
A series of textbook business errors. They lacked competitive differentiation. They wasted a ton of money on ineffective ads. The spray and pray approach. And in a particularly painful early lesson, they leased these high-priced offices because they foolishly believed that an impressive building was necessary to close big deals.
So it was poor business acumen just compounded by these really foolish beliefs about how growth actually happens.
Yep. And this whole path of missteps leads directly to the core pain point that provided those essential, painful early lessons.
Yeah.
The debt nightmare.
How bad did it actually get?
By 2004, the consulting business had gone completely sideways. On top of the original $20,000 in debt his mother had taken on, they had piled on another $100,000.
$100,000.
Yeah, and largely from those missteps. The expensive office, the bad hires, the ad spend. This debt wasn't some abstract number on a spreadsheet. It was terrifyingly real.
This is where the story gets really dramatic, because the sheer weight of that debt led to this near disaster. They couldn't afford the rent on their pricey high-rise office tower anymore.
Right, and moving out meant they had to get around the landlord, who was entitled to just seize all of their equipment as collateral for the unpaid rent.
So they planned a secret move.
A very tense, chaotic Sunday evening. He, along with a few friends, snuck into the building through the loading garage, planning to secretly move out computers, servers, all the essentials. The tension must have been just immense, trying to look casual while carrying out monitor towers and desks.
And they get interrupted halfway through, right?
They do. The tower's security guard shows up. And the founder's mother, Gillian, who was the real operational and financial backbone in those early days, she had to talk her way out of an immediate seizure of everything.
Wow.
She somehow managed to convince the guard to let them finish moving some of the items, but they had to leave a bunch of expensive, heavy office furniture behind to make it look like they weren't completely clearing out. They basically made their escape across Lake Washington to a tiny, cheaper office.
But the debt was still there. And a couple of months later comes the debt collector incident, the one he famously dubs Rocco.
Yes. The gold-chained, chest-haired collector who shows up at the new office looking for the founder personally. And this was the crushing moment of realization about personal liability.
What do you mean?
He realized that the hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt were not just corporate liabilities. They were in his personal name and tied to his Social Security number.
Whoa, wait, so the company was incorporated, but he had personally guaranteed the debt.
That's the critical, hard-won lesson here. First-time founders often sign personal guarantees, especially when getting loans for equipment or opening commercial credit cards, because the corporation itself has no financial history. So when the company went south...
the debt reverted directly to him, personally.
Exactly. And his mother bore the lion's share of the stress. Not just dodging collectors, but dealing with the emotional weight of hiding this mountain of debt from his father.
But she was also incredibly resourceful in how she handled it.
Her proactive approach is what saved them from total financial ruin. She learned that a collections agency would typically pay the original creditor only about 5 to 10% of the actual amount owed.
And then they try to collect the full 100% from the debtor.
Right. That's their whole business model. So Gillian preemptively contacted the original creditors, Washington Mutual, Bank of America, Chase, and offered them a smaller sum, often 5 to 10% of the principal, in exchange for them writing off the debt instead of selling it.
She used the debt collector's own leverage against them.
She did. And this tactic often worked because the original creditor saw cash immediately and got to avoid the whole hassle of collections. It was genuinely astute financial maneuvering under extreme stress.
So the immediate lesson was about financial security, legal structure, personal guarantees.
Mhm. But the enduring lesson was about secrecy itself. The founder admits he willfully chose to ignore the financial problems, just telling himself his mother could handle it. He realized later that hiding the truth only created this nightmare of secrecy that nearly ended in professional and personal disaster.
Hiding it from his father just caused unnecessary stress, the kind of stress that contributed to his later depression. If they had been honest from the start, maybe his father could have helped.
Or at the very least, they could have avoided the massive interest penalties that were piling up. This deeply painful experience connects directly to his later commitment to radical transparency as a core company value. He learned, the hard way, that the psychological cost of secrecy was just. It was too high to ever justify.
Okay, so moving from that personal financial nightmare to institutional funding, let's talk about the big one, venture capital. When VCs inject millions into a company, founders usually assume everyone's aligned. Everyone wants a successful exit, right?
Yes, but the definition of success is fundamentally different, and that's the key. Institutional investors operate under completely different motivations than founders, especially when it comes to the required size of that successful exit. They are playing a totally different mathematical game.
What's the math there? We always hear about funds needing to return 3x, but how does that actually translate to the day-to-day life of a founder?
It's the Pareto principle in action, the 80-20 rule. Roughly 20% of their investments are expected to return 80% or more of the entire fund.
So they're not looking for a bunch of solid doubles or triples.
No, VCs are not looking for a strong, stable, profitable business that makes the founder happy and wealthy. They are looking exclusively for the incredibly rare moonshots of $1 billion-plus business. Because that one massive outlier success is what's necessary to cover all the inevitable failures, the 80% that either die or return very little.
So the pressure isn't just about growth, it's about exponential outlier growth. And if you don't look like a potential billion-dollar company, you are, for all practical purposes, dead to them.
That is the dark truth that investors will not openly tell founders. If your company looks like a dud, even if it's profitable and stable, their attention just fades. They move on to the next bet.
And if things go poorly,
If things go poorly for an extended stretch, replacing the CEO is very likely, because VCs have to maintain this illusion of high performance for their own investors, their limited partners. And, critically, personal happiness and successfully raising VC are almost never correlated.
let's break down the VC math with a concrete example. Say a fund, like Ignition Partners mentioned in the book, raised $300 million. They expect to return at least 3 times that, so $900 million, to their investors.
Now imagine they invest $1 million in your company. If your company later sells and returns $20 million to them, that sounds phenomenal, right? A 20x return.
Yeah, that sounds like a huge win.
For you, maybe. But for the fund, that's math working against them. That $20 million barely moves the needle toward their $900 million goal. They need a handful of those $1 million investments to return $200 million or $300 million each to cover the entire portfolio of failures.
In this relentless pursuit of the outlier is where VCs exert their leverage, often through things like preferred stock and veto power. This is where the alignment really fractures.
Yes. Preferred stock means the investor gets paid back first before common stock, which is what founders and employees mostly hold, sees a single dime. And veto power often gives investors the right to block major transactions, like a sale.
Wait, so a founder could get a massive life-changing offer, say a $100 million sale, and be forced to risk everything because the investors need a unicorn.
It happens all the time, or at least the threat of it does. The venture business is all about outliers. If an investor believes that a $100 million offer today could potentially be a $500 million offer in 2 more years, they are contractually and, morally obligated to their LPs to block that sale.
So the founder, who would be financially secure for life with their share of $100 million, is forced back to the casino table to pursue that 5x or 10x larger outcome, even though it could all go to zero.
And that's why founders often feel like they've lost control after taking VC money. Because in many ways, they have.
This makes the next section so critical, the financial showdown between product businesses and services businesses. The media is so focused on the glamorous product side that the actual financial advantages of services firms get completely lost.
This is a huge aha moment in the source material. Product businesses, like Moz's software subscription, get valued at a really high multiple, 3 to 8 times their annual recurring revenue.
Okay.
Services businesses, like consultancies, are typically valued at only 1 to 2 times revenue. So the product company gets all the prestige, all the press, the higher valuation.
Right. So let's look at this hidden founder payday he lays out, comparing Nikki, the product CEO, and Silvio, the consulting CEO. They both have $10 million in annual revenue.
Okay, so Nikki, the product CEO, she chases that high valuation. She raises $8.5 million in VC, puts 15% in the employee option pool. Because of all those VC rounds, she only owns 15% of the company she started.
So she's been heavily diluted.
Massively. If her company sells at a generous 4x multiplier for $40 million, her personal share as the founder is $6 million. A fantastic payday, no question. But she's highly diluted.
Now let's look at Silvio, the consulting CEO.
Silvio raised $0. He retained 100% ownership. If his services firm sells at the median 1.5x multiplier, the sale price is $15 million.
Which means his founder shares.
The whole thing, $15 million.
Wow.
The punchline is just staggering. Silvio's founder share is $15 million, compared to Nikki's $6 million. The consulting firm, despite the massively lower valuation and the total lack of prestige, provided a superior financial deal for the founder because he retained full ownership.
That's a core truth the entire VC ecosystem is incentivized to ignore. And we haven't even talked about failure rates.
Oh, that makes it even more stark. According to U.S. Census data, services firms have a 5-year survival rate of about 47%. Almost half make it.
Okay, and tech startups.
Miserable. Less than 10% survival rate, according to the National Venture Capital Association.
So you're telling me you can endure immense risk, give up control, accept massive dilution for a potentially smaller payday, when the services model is often a better financial deal for you personally, with more than 4 times the chance of survival?
That's the question every founder should be asking themselves. And even when a VC-backed company is successful, that high paper wealth often doesn't equal actual cash. This is the reality of illiquid stock.
And illiquid stock means what exactly for someone who doesn't know?
It's stock in a private company. It's not traded on an exchange. You can only sell it if you can find a willing, accredited buyer, which is extremely rare before a big event like an IPO or an acquisition. It's just a piece of paper that says you own something, but you can't pay your mortgage with it.
And this illiquidity directly affects founder salaries because the board sets the salary.
Yes. Your board of directors, which includes your investors, sets the CEO's salary. And if you own, say, $10 million in a liquid stock, that paper wealth is factored into your total compensation.
Ah, I see the dynamic. The board uses the promise of future millions to justify paying the CEO less cash today than their peers who work at, say, a stable enterprise.
Precisely. You're paper rich, but cash poor. The founder of Moz recounts that for years he felt financially worse off than his friends working stable, mid-level jobs even after years of growth. You might be a successful founder on paper, but you could still be struggling to pay the bills until a liquidity event happens, which, on average, takes 11 years.
The book is so adamant that secrecy is a disease in any organization. We saw how hiding the financial truth nearly destroyed Moz personally. On a larger scale, hiding the truth about poor funding or internal conflict or product flaws, it just leads to a loss of faith and eventual disaster.
It's corrosive. When leadership operates under the assumption that they can hide bad news or bad behavior, all the incentives to prevent that behavior just fall apart. We saw this with Uber's toxic culture, or in less dramatic ways, like management hiding bad sales projections from the staff.
And the founder realized the only antidote to the pain of secrecy was embracing transparency. But that requires genuine empathy, right? It's not just about shouting bad news from the rooftops.
That's where Kim Scott's concept of radical candor becomes the essential framework. You have to balance transparency with empathy to avoid falling into these really destructive behaviors.
Let's run through that matrix for the listener because it's such a brilliant way to assess your own communication style.
Okay, so if you challenge someone directly but you don't care personally, like firing someone over email with no context, you're in obnoxious aggression.
Right.
If you care personally but you fail to challenge directly, like praising poor work to avoid conflict, you're stuck in ruinous empathy. And if you do neither, you're in manipulative insincerity, which is the worst place to be.
The highest value area is radical candor, challenging directly and caring personally. How does this apply during a crisis, like a really difficult fundraising round?
It means giving regular status updates, even if they're painful. Instead of hiding the failure until the very last investor backs out, A transparent leader lets the team know exactly what investors are saying, what metrics are weak, and how serious the risk is.
That allows employees to anticipate a difficult future, maybe even offer solutions. It certainly prepares them for cost-cutting or layoffs instead of just surprising them.
It replaces rumor and fear with concrete reality. The founder's golden rule for his executives was, communicate as though every single email and conversation will one day be leaked. If you're operating with integrity and empathy, you should be proud, not embarrassed by how you communicate.
So transparency has to be codified. It has to be a core value, which is what Moz did with their values, known as Tag F.
Transparent, authentic, generous, fun, empathetic, and exceptional.
And critically, these weren't just words on a plaque in the lobby.
No. Real values have to force hard decisions, and they often work against short-term growth or money. The best illustration of this is the cancellation policy debate.
Right, the company was struggling with churn. The average customer was only staying for about 11 months, which is terrible for a subscription business.
So a leadership team member suggested instituting a tricky cancellation policy, requiring customers to call in on the phone rather than just clicking a button online. It's known as retention friction.
A move that would absolutely boost short-term revenue by making it intentionally difficult to leave, but the founder immediately pushed back.
He pointed out that this practice was just an industry-wide technique to frustrate customers into staying subscribed. It was fundamentally not empathy, it was manipulation. It wasn't transparency, it was friction by design.
And his response became a core part of their operating philosophy. They're not core values if you're willing to sacrifice them in exchange for money.
If you uphold your values, even when it hurts financially, everyone, employees and customers, knows they're genuine. And that decision to make cancellation easy and transparent likely contributed to a lower churn rate in the long run because it built trust, even with the people who left.
This principle extends directly to hiring and culture. Values have to be a crucial evaluation criteria, and the danger lies in cultural mismatch, which Moz experienced firsthand with the veteran software executive they hired.
This executive was a high performer, highly recommended, really effective at playing internal politics. But he was also a deeply poisonous and political figure who routinely made sexist remarks to young women on the team, sent offensive memes, verbally bullied subordinates.
And because he was seen as performing well, leadership didn't move against him right away. The founder realized later that this sent a signal to everyone that his performance mattered more than the values of empathy and exceptional behavior.
It was a deep, deep cost of insincerity. When the founder eventually confronted the issue, the head of HR was shocked. She said, "You're the first person I've ever heard this from." The victims didn't feel safe reporting him because they assumed management wouldn't care since he was a high performer.
That is the ultimate erosion of psychological safety. The lesson is that if your company's values are just marketing fluff things like hustle or work hard, play hard, they lose all credibility. Real values require you to make difficult, costly terminations, even for high-performing employees, if they are actively undermining the culture.
You might lose a few quarters of revenue, but you save the soul of the company. The failure to fire that executive immediately told the rest of the company that Tag E was conditional. And that's far more expensive than any lost revenue.
Moving from internal culture to strategy, we have to challenge another sacred myth of Silicon Valley, the idea of the pivot.
Oh yeah, the pivot, the belief that it's this fundamental right that absolves all past sins. We constantly hear about Tote turning into Pinterest or Odeo becoming Twitter.
And the media glorifies it, leading founders to believe that just getting started is more important than choosing a wise path, because you can always just change course later if it's wrong.
The founder of Moz calls this bollocks.
Chuckles, okay.
He argues pretty forcefully that execution is far more malleable and easier to improve than the idea, the market, or the business model.
And Moz's long-term success, that 100% year-over-year growth from 2007 to 2013, that came entirely from iterative improvement, right? Not from some radical change.
Entirely. They just stuck to the core idea and hammered away at getting better at it. Pivoting is incredibly costly. There are massive switching costs for your customers and for your own company. Migrating everyone to a new system takes a huge amount of capital, energy, and focus.
So it's better, as he suggests, to be the tortoise pick, the right race and the right route in the first place, and win through slow, consistent execution. If you have to pivot, you probably chose the wrong market to begin with.
Which leads to some unconventional and very specific tips for market selection.
What should you look for when you're deciding where to compete?
First, he says, choose a market where your competitive advantage can be based on execution or speed or quality, not on unique assets like proprietary data or regulatory capture. Those are just too hard to acquire and maintain.
But the most important advice is about who to target. You want to go after markets served by incumbents who are already ripe for disruption.
Specifically, you target incumbents who are 1. Hated by their customers, 2. Unwilling or unable to evolve, 3. Protected by some competitive advantage that's starting to unravel, or 4. In an early non-mature market. If you find a market with 2 or more of those conditions, you have a solid path forward just through sheer execution and better customer service.
Let's revisit the transition Moz made from consulting to a product business, because this is a common scaling strategy. The problem with consulting, as we said, is that it's limited by time and people. It's just very hard to scale.
You can only bill for so many hours in a day. The 100th client requires just as much of your time as the first. To get massive scale, you need a product that can serve thousands of customers at once with minimal human input.
What's so fascinating is that Moz's transition to product the moment they started to scale was, as he says, mostly by accident. How did an accident transform their entire business model?
Well, in late 2006, the founder and his programmer had built some proprietary internal SEO tools they were using for their clients, like tracking keyword rankings. And they hatched this idea to open up access to these tools to attract more website traffic and build their community.
But they were worried if they put the tools out there completely for free, the server bandwidth would just collapse.
Exactly. So purely as a measure to lessen that traffic overload risk, they put the tools behind a $39 a month PayPal subscription in February 2007. It was a server management decision, not some grand strategic pivot.
And that tiny, unintentional move transformed the business overnight into a scalable, high-margin software business.
And that accident worked because Moz had already, unintentionally, invested in the pillars they needed for a successful product: content, community, and brand trust.
They had branded themselves as trustworthy, transparent operators in the chaotic and often scammy SEO field.
So even when their first product wasn't great, it was buggy, it was hard to use, customers trusted the brand because of all the content and the taggy values they demonstrated in their free educational work.
So the advice for other firms trying this consulting to product transition is really practical.
It is. First, start with a product that's directly informed by your consulting work, because that exposure to real client pain points ensures you're building something people actually need.
And second, use the services revenue to fund the product's creation, right? Maintain focus on the services business until the product actually proves itself.
And there's this incredible data nugget that proves the value of community and slow conversion. Moz analyzed their visitor funnel and found that customers who signed up immediately after one visit from a Google search, they had an average tenure of less than 4 months.
So very low lifetime value, low LTV.
Very low. But the incredible contrast came from the high engagement users. If a customer visited the Moz website 12 times or more over a 3-month span before signing up, they stuck around for 14+ months as a paying subscriber.
Whoa. So their best, most loyal, lowest churn customers were the ones who spent a ton of time on the website, consuming educational resources, participating in the community, testing the free tools.
Which means it was actually in Moz's long-term financial interest not to promote conversions too heavily or too fast. A slow-burn conversion process, built on trust and generosity, yielded dramatically better LTV than a fast conversion. It's a strategy that perfectly aligned with their values.
Let's move on to how a founder's personal attributes become the company's organizational DNA. Startups, it seems, inevitably carry their founder's baggage, whether it's good or bad.
Oh, you see this everywhere. Amazon inherited Jeff Bezos' passion for logistics and his famous thriftiness. Moz, on the other hand, struggled from its inception to create high-quality, stable software.
And this was rooted in the founder's blind spot. He had only, as he calls it, level 1 theoretical knowledge of software engineering.
The book outlines this crucial scale for aptitude that every founder should use for self-diagnosis. Level 1 is theoretical knowledge. You know the jargon, but you can't do the work. Level 2 is managerial knowledge. You rely on others. Level 3 is practical, applied knowledge. And level 4 is deep, working expertise, plus the ability to teach others.
So if a founder is operating at level 1 or 2 in a crucial area like engineering in a software company, the company's long-term success will correlate shockingly well to that lack of aptitude.
Exactly. He admits that despite hiring strong engineers, he always struggled to manage the engineering process or to call bullshit with credibility.
And that lack of ability to challenge or understand technical debt means the engineering team can run into problems the founder doesn't even know exist.
And that challenge persisted for years. Founders either had to fix this by finding co-founders with complementary level 4 strengths or deliberately learn the process themselves.
This theme continues with management itself. The myth is that founding a startup means doing what you love, but once an operation scales, the CEO's job shifts dramatically from doing the work SEO, writing, coding, to pure management.
Handling crises, recruiting, delegating, constantly amplifying the vision, which leads directly to what he calls the management trap, the pervasive belief that management is the only way up the ladder, and therefore good individual contributors, or ICs, will automatically make good managers.
Which is it's complete nonsense, as proven by decades of organizational research.
Absolutely. Google's famous Project Aristotle research analyzed thousands of teams and found that great managers consistently had behaviors largely disconnected from being a great IC. Being a good coach, empowering the team, expressing interest of their well-being, communicating clearly.
A brilliant engineer might be a terrible manager because they lack the empathy or patience for people development.
In Moz's own 6-year, 2-CEO journey to find a functioning project planning system perfectly illustrates this pain. It wasn't a quick fix. It was, in his words, wading into a painful slog of failure, learning, and repetition. They tried over 10 different iterations, from all-staff Friday reports that were immediately ignored to expensive 2-day offsites with outside facilitators that yielded nothing. The problem wasn't a lack of effort. It was the assumption that a new process alone would solve structural team dynamics.
So what was the ultimate solution?
It was organizational structure, restructuring the company into functional business units and giving teams more autonomy. But they also had to solve the career path problem to retain their best talent.
And to do that, Moz adopted the dual-track career path.
This was critical because after they got funding, they discovered 25 out of 40 non-management employees wanted to become managers. Not because they wanted to manage people, but because they saw it as the only path to advancement, to a better title, more pay, more stock.
Right. They just wanted professional validation.
Exactly. The dual-track system ensures that ICs, like a senior designer or a principal product architect, can grow their title, pay, stock, and influence, holding equivalent levels of compensation as those on the people manager track. This lets the company retain deep technical expertise where it's needed most, rather than pushing brilliant designers into miserable management jobs.
This brings us to the biggest strategic failure outlined in the book: the catastrophic loss of focus after they raised $18 million in 2012. The money became a burden, not a tool.
The founder admits to falling victim to the myth that they were obligated to spend that money quickly and try everything to find more growth. He called it magical thinking, believing the money itself would somehow solve their problems.
And instead of focusing on their core SEO product, Moz Pro, they pursued product proliferation.
They built or acquired multiple new products like Follower Wonk, Moz Content, Moz Local. This resulted in 8 different revenue streams, spreading the leadership team dangerously thin.
And the consequence was brutal. Every single product missed its projections. The complexity just overwhelmed their small team. By 2016, a massive reduction in force, or IF, was necessary. They had to cut 59 people.
And we should be clear, a WAR-IF is a structured process of elimination based on business necessity, not performance. And the irony is brutal. 75% of the needed savings had to come from personnel. Software companies have low overhead, so when you need to save money, people are often the only resource left to cut.
This leads to one of the most powerful anecdotes in the entire book: the tense board meeting about the severance package for those 59 people.
Yeah. The founder, facing a room full of millionaires, aggressively challenged the board on providing a minimum of 6 weeks of severance. The board was balking at the cost, arguing for the bare minimum required by law.
He asked each board member if they had ever been laid off, right?
He did. Received negative answers across the board before delivering this cutting statement about the vast gulf between their financial security and that of the average employee. He had to threaten to quit over the issue to get them the package.
That moment just underscores this profound commitment to values over short-term financial prudence. Despite the financial jeopardy the company was in, the board eventually supported it.
Yeah, it cost Moz $1.4 million in lump sum payouts, so the laid-off employees could immediately apply for unemployment. It was a massive financial hit, but it was a testament to Tag Fee.
And the key lesson learned from that whole painful RAF process was the profound cost of the leaky bucket problem.
Mm-hmm. Moz Pro's average customer tenure was only 11 months. Why are you spending millions on customer acquisition when your customers are leaving so quickly? You're filling a leaky bucket.
And when they were forced to cut costs, a smaller, highly focused team that concentrated on just a few things achieved significantly better results. Focus, born of necessity, is what saved the company.
Hmm.
The final major section of the book addresses a critical topic that's often just left out of the startup narrative, the importance of vulnerability in mental health and leadership.
The startup stereotype favors the strong, silent, unflinching leader, right?
Right.
The one who internalizes stress like a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk. And that model is it's disastrous. It causes distrust, massive burnout, and it contributes heavily to the depression epidemic among CEOs.
Vulnerability is so often mistaken for weakness, but the source material shows it can be an incredible leadership superpower. We see this so powerfully illustrated by the deeply personal story of his wife Geraldine's tumor scare in 2012.
Yeah. Geraldine was diagnosed with a 1-centimeter mass on her hypothalamus, and the radiologist note described it as worrisome for something bad. This was a terrifying, stressful time for the founder, who was already dealing with immense debt and business stress.
He recounts walking into the all-hands meeting to announce the news to the company, and he says he sobbed in front of everyone. It wasn't a performance. It was raw, honest grief.
But that raw vulnerability was professionally affirming. It demonstrated to the entire team the depth of their leader's struggle and his humanity. It solidified the team's support and camaraderie, and it ended in a giant group hug and offers of help.
That shared vulnerability speaks directly to the concept of psychological safety, which, as we mentioned earlier, Google's Project Aristotle found to be the best, most consistent predictor of high team output. Better than IQ, better than experience.
Psychological safety is just this sense of confidence that the team won't embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up, whether it's about a bad idea, a personal crisis, or a faulty product line.
And you see examples of this improving the culture throughout the book.
Yeah.
The engineer who gave a lunch and learned about her gender transition. The father who shared the story of his son coming out. These honest, personal stories fostered acceptance and knowledge.
And you can contrast that with the toxic environment created by the sexist manager. When women didn't feel safe reporting his behavior, that toxicity festered. And that lack of safety inhibited their ability to speak up on other business issues, too, like product flaws or strategic errors. It harmed the collective work.
The discussion then moves to the depression epidemic, a crippling reality that founders rarely discuss publicly because of that strong leader myth.
At a 2014 Founder Group CEO Summit, the founder asked the CEOs present if they had dealt with depression or other mental disorders during their tenure. Nearly every hand in the room went up.
Wow.
That moment shifted his intense feeling of loneliness and shame to a realization that he was part of an overwhelming majority. He realized he wasn't some frail outlier. He was a peer among others who were all struggling.
He describes the symptoms so vividly, becoming an argumentative pessimist, intense self-loathing, physical pain like sciatica so bad he could barely walk.
And the crippling nighttime loop of just fixated negative thoughts about failure and screw-ups that would keep him awake for hours.
His path forward required professional therapy and coaching, and accepting the very humbling truth that, as he puts it, no one is self-aware. Understanding your own biases and core beliefs is an ongoing journey.
And his self-diagnosis led him to this deep-seated realization that his biases stemmed from intense imposter syndrome, a profound, constant fear of being a fraud, and that Moz was just accidental, undeserved success.
And the admission of that deepest fear is what weakened the shackles of secrecy and fear. When you dig up those core beliefs and admit them, even just to yourself, the psychological defenses that impede good, rational decision-making start to weaken. It's a huge step toward effective leadership.
Which leads directly to the final, most crucial cheat code in the book, focusing on behavior, not outcome.
Why is this so difficult for driven, outcome-focused leaders to internalize?
Because organizations so often reward outcomes like high revenue, even if the underlying behaviors like risky growth hacks or opacity or mistreating employees were bad. Focusing only on the outcome makes success feel random and uncontrollable.
But the successful path is investing in the behaviors we believe are healthy diet, exercise, investment in self-awareness, transparency, regardless of whether they yield immediate, measurable financial outcomes.
When we concentrate on behaviors, we gain clarity and control, and we free ourselves from the anxiety of uncontrollable results. The irony is, by focusing on the behavior, the outcomes themselves tend to improve, because the foundation is just so much healthier.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? This deep dive has delivered some really surprising and honestly painful truths that redefine the startup game.
hmm First, that archetypical founder image is misleading. The odds are stacked against you if you lack capital and a network. Second, the services business model is often financially superior for founders than the prestigious product model because you get to retain 100% ownership.
And third, psychological safety and vulnerability are paramount to team success. They correlate better with high output than IQ or experience. The so-called soft skills are actually the hard skills.
And the founder, having gone through this whole painful process, is applying these hard-won cheat codes to his next company. He's choosing a brand name that's flexible and easy to say, has a clear .com domain, just to avoid the headaches of the past.
He's optimizing for optionality and his exit goals bootstrapping initially for freedom and control. He's documenting his core beliefs and biases from day one, including his commitment to remote work and paying top salaries for fewer, high-quality people.
He's taking the Silvio path, not the Nikki path.
Right, and his commitment to transparency remains absolute. The founder recounted this hypothetical acquisition scenario with HubSpot, which would have been a great strategic fit, but the deal required total secrecy, an NDA that would have prevented him from ever speaking about the process again.
And he realized he would rather turn down a spectacular financial exit than agree to a deal involving total enforced secrecy, because that opacity would just breed resentment and continue the myth of success, fooling the next generation of founders.
This raises a really important question for you to think about. If you founded a company to change the world or share your vision, would you take that massive financial payday if it meant going completely silent and letting the myth of success continue to fool the next generation? Where do your values conflict with your ambition, and how much is silence worth?
And, maybe more importantly, what are you doing today to invest in the behaviors that will serve your long-term mental health, self-awareness, clear communication, integrity, regardless of the uncontrollable financial outcomes of your work?
That's the real cheat code. You own the behavior, not the result, and that's something worth deeply thinking about.